Marie, it is so nice to have you back. I hope you're feeling a little bit
Thank
better.
you. Yes, I am feeling much better. Thanks a lot.
Good. I missed you last
Yeah.
time. While you were ill, did you get to sit in bed and read lots of books?
I actually do more listening to books now than reading because I find
Oh,
I'm so
interesting.
busy, I can do something while I'm listening, which I find helpful. But
Mm.
actually, even when I did my degree at university, and this was a long time ago, we did a novel a week, which I found difficult to keep up with because they were like
Ugh.
3 foot thick. They weren't just like little slim
Ugh.
volumes. So I used to go to the library and get the audio recording, which in those days was on
On
tape, no
CD.
tapes.
Oh, on
So
tape. Oh
there'd
my
be about
gosh.
10 tapes for, these really thick
Wow.
books. But I always found that much easier way of digesting than
Mm.
actually reading, weirdly.
I do like a good audiobook, but I like a good book as well, particularly in the bath.
Yeah, yeah.
It's your own time you're wasting. Ramblings from Beyond the Classroom with Marie and Jodi.
Today we're talking to Ian Ross, who's sharing his perspective on learning to read. Ian's been a teacher for 22 years and has also worked as a Twinkle phonics trainer for nearly a full year. So he's got a really good perspective on both teaching reading and learning reading.
Welcome, Ian.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much for having me.
So tell us a little bit about your story. How did you learn to read? Let's start there.
Gosh, that's a really big one. The only main thing I can really particularly remember is as a child on a typical Sunday night, a bit of school homework, was a tobacco tin and have an empty tobacco tin. And I just can see it now, picturing myself sitting on my mother's armchair, opening the tobacco tin, so getting a waft of stale smoke, and then taking all these folded little bits of card up with words on and basically sifting through these words in order to read them by sight. And it was just basically a repetition method, really. And then just every so often new word being added and the previous ones looking more and more tattered as I was going through them. And that's really all I can remember in terms of the strategy that I was taught in order to support me to read. And let me just say, for me, that never worked. It really, really didn't work. And I think, looking back on it now, and and knowing what I do about, teaching children to read, is that I didn't have a very strong visual memory, and I think that was the main principle back then, in terms of teaching children to read, was reading words by sight and just building up that vocabulary by sight. But it really didn't work for me. I just don't think I had a strong enough memory at that moment in time in my life in order to hold on to all that required knowledge, and it really didn't work for me.
So, what do you imagine it's like when you get to secondary school and you can't read very well?
Yeah, because so much is based around the need to
Yeah,
read.
yeah.
Having problems, I think, if we start from the beginning in terms of having problems in my reading, and identifying that there were issues, but still giving me more of the same, I think that put up barriers for me in terms of, you know, my self confidence big time. And I think my teachers were getting frustrated with me as well, because obviously this approach that worked for other children wasn't working for me. So I do sense during the course of certainly through juniors, um, their frustration, and sometimes their frustration taken out on me, which also knocked my confidence big time. And then going into secondary and being aware of my own limitations, because one, being naturally aware myself, but also two, being told that I was going out for these extra lessons and and things like that, which was more of the same. Going into secondary school, being aware that I wasn't at the same level as other children, and I knew that I'd go into classes at the lower level, and which I did. And you know, anytime as a secondary school student being asked to read, and I get it now, that just overriding fear of public humiliation. I could just see myself in like literacy in English lessons, being asked to read as you go around in the groups, and just thinking, oh my god, let's run out of time, that it won't be me. It was just feeling inferior, really. And thinking back then, they didn't know either how to support me. They knew I had issues, and I got more of the same. And I can't say that started in year 7 either. I can remember in year 8 I got a little bit more support, but it was just more of the same old what had gone before. So in terms of when you originally asked me how did I learn to read, it's a bit of a wing and a prayer, really. Really was. I couldn't tell you now. But yeah, I just remember the feelings of potential humiliation, not understanding. And again, that had come back from junior school, because I remember in year 2 going up to juniors and being laughed at because I couldn't recite the letters of the alphabet. And I vividly remember that in the playground. And it's just, all of that build and build and build over, your experiences of school. And then you hit secondary school, which is kind of the penultimate experience that you're going to have. And it's going to so much builds on that, and that you're told that, yet to feel that you're in that position is scary. Yeah, it's scary. It's scary.
Was there a particular method that did help you in the end, or?
I was trying to think about. I think as I got older, I think my visual memory did strengthen, and I do think I'm a great believer now when in my line of teaching that repetition and overlearning is the key. And I think, a lot of reading now that I do as an adult, I do think, I mean, having learnt phonics from teacher training, that opened as an adult, and my own literacy skills as an adult, that was just a light bulb moment that, for me as I came to it about 2021 teacher training, and it was just a light bulb moment for me that I'd been missing this puzzle piece all of my life. And it just started to make sense. And I used to get really frustrated when people say to me, I mean, not just reading, because the reading and writing go hand in hand. My mum used to say to me, can't you see the word in your head? And I couldn't see anything. And yet she'd say to me, can't you see the word in your head? I just really couldn't see anything. And then I used to get really frustrated when people say to me, go and look in a dictionary. And that will work if you know what the word looks like. But what about those really ambiguous ones that don't sound like they're spelled, or have two letters that are well, I'm trying, it just didn't work, and I used to get frustrated in that as well. So I think repetition worked really well for me in the end. And I think a lot of what I read now as an adult, and it's not reading for pleasure, the more academic side of things I read a lot more now. You get those familiarity words that come up that you've seen before, and you know what they mean. So I think that helped a lot. Other than that, I really couldn't tell you. I just think it's repetition.
I was just thinking, how did your experience shape the way that you teach? Because, you just got more and more of the same when it was obvious that wasn't working. No one thought, let's try something different. So I wondered how that influenced you as a teacher.
Big time, in terms of when I can't put my hand on my heart and say, I went into primary education in terms of, the confidence with delivering literacy and numeracy. I did as much as I could in terms of upskilling myself, and I did a lot. But I'm a very creative person. I wanted to go in for the DT and the art and just the creative side, and I started teacher training and coming into it when the primary literacy and numeracy hours really kicked off. And let's face it, when they kicked off, they kicked off big time. It squished a lot of those more creative things, and all the things that I went to out the window a little bit. But as time went on, and as I saw this light bulb myself with phonics, I thought, gosh, as an early 20-year-old, the window of opportunity it gave to me, not only in the ability to read more confidently, but building that confidence in my own ability. I just thought, if I had that at 4 and 5, I might have been a different person. And I'm not shy about it anymore. I've suffered with mental illness over the years, and I really don't believe that helped my cause in any stretch, either. Unfortunately, it does run my family, but I think those experiences about dealing with those challenges also added to that. So I went into teaching. And I've predominantly in my 22 years taught EYFS and year 1, a little bit of key stage, a little bit of year 2, but not really key stage 2. because I want to lay those solid foundations. Because I know, as an adult, as you're building that wall, if you miss a brick there and miss a brick there and miss a brick there and keep building still, it's so much harder to go back and fill those gaps. And I didn't want that for a child, and I've never wanted that for a child. So, phonics, I'm the biggest, or one of the biggest champions for phonics, because it opened my eyes to a new world in my early 20s. I can only imagine when I see it, what it does for a 4 and 5 year old for the first time. And I've never got, bored or delighted by seeing that when, those children read those small words for the very first time, um, and build that confidence. It's wonderful.
So my nephew has just started school, and he's just started phonics at school, and he is at the minute doing s and which he very proudly told me at the weekend that we're learning about s and. And I was like, okay, I've very little knowledge about phonics because I've been a maths teacher. I didn't learn through phonics. I learned the phonetic alphabet and stuff. So what little I do know is just picked up through kind of generally being a teacher. The way that he's learning is he's learning what a book is, and he's written a story. It's just random scribbles on a bit of paper, but it's a story. Tell us a little bit more about phonics. What does phonics look like in early years foundation for those like me who have no
Well,
idea?
you're right. It's the basic in foundation. Children learn the basic phonological code. So that's realizing, every letter sound or phoneme makes a sound, and that sometimes they can come together to make a digraph, which is a unit of sound, as well as a trigraph is a unit of sound. And it's a very explicit scaffolded system in order to teach children to read and to write. But let's focus a little bit more on reading. So it is like a puzzle, and I think, for me, it looks like a completed puzzle in your head when all those pieces come together. And it's my role to introduce those pieces sequentially and at the right time in order to complete that puzzle. So, for example, classically, when children go into reception, they are taught SATPIN, SATPIN, and letter names are not introduced until, with the Twinkle Phonics scheme, or program, until about level 3, because it's the sound knowledge that I need to acquire first. But even by knowing SATPIN, children can read very simple small 2-letter words or 3-letter words, so you can start that process straight away and build that confidence already. And then, once they can blend for themselves, it's developing more of those grapheme phoneme correspondence, and it's giving them the opportunity to also learn what we call common exception words, which are tricky words, which are words at that moment in time that a child is at in a particular level, that are phonetically decodable, but will appear in lots of texts that they will encounter. So it's really important that they do know those words. But as they go through to Key Stage 1, then they're building on that basic phonological code and then developing the advanced phonological code. But the end, the ultimate goal, by the end of Key Stage 1, you end up with a child who fundamentally has a love of reading, and that's the most important thing. But also, has, around 90 words per minute, developing prosody, so that, when they are reading, that they are comprehending, most importantly, what they are reading, and can go away and learn about volcanoes for themselves or dinosaurs for themselves. It just gives them such a wider opportunity. But also, as well as phonics, I'm a real big advocate of explicitly teaching vocabulary. I mean, in my 22 years, starting a topic or a theme, whether it's, even within numeracy, when you're introducing addition, you will say to them, oh, in this unit of work, we're using the words, that word, etc. But for me, it's really important that you add meat and substance to those words and explicitly teach them what they are, because, again, experience that is held with me is, I think it was latter senior school or early in college, the word concept. My lecturer or teacher kept on using the word concept all of the time, and I didn't know what it meant. I really didn't know what it meant. I'd never encountered it before. But all the time thinking, what's she referring to? This word concept. And it's another form for idea. Now, if I'd been told that, we're going to, very early on, it would have made so much more sense to me, and it wouldn't have, brought up those dreaded feelings of, oh my gosh, I don't understand, what's going on here. So I'm a real, because unfortunately in education now, and it's at primary and it's definitely at secondary as well, you can't make any assumptions anymore in terms of the vocabulary that children will come to you with. In, children coming into reception, for example, I can't guarantee they know the difference between wet and dry, light and dark, and, we could years and years ago make those assumptions, but we can't anymore. And it's, you can't even, I was thinking about this earlier as well, even in science, make the assumption, before you move on, that children know what photosynthesis is. I think you need to go back and you need to, children will come to you with a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of experience. You need to hook that out of their long term memory. So bring it to the forefront of their mind so that then you can build upon that. So it's got that scaffold of something that they know already. And I'm a real passionate, advocate of that you're building on, whatever year group you are. But, secondary school teachers, children coming into year 7, wow, my goodness, they will have such a wealth of knowledge and experience. Use that to your advantage, tease out that, early key stage 2 knowledge, then to build upon things. Yeah, I'm just such a big advocate of that.
That's a really good point, Ian, because of course Ofsted and the reading framework are now saying that phonics needs to be taught in Key Stage 3, which is something that traditionally Key Stage 3 teachers have never done. And my big worry about that as an ex-English teacher is that how will it damage the confidence of these pupils coming in, knowing that they, in inverted commas, should know this stuff, and they don't, and they're having to do it again. Just wondered what your thoughts were on that.
I think it's something I'm quite excited about, in terms of, I think in order to reap the huge benefits that could be reached, I think there needs to be a lot put into place before we get to that point. And it's not necessarily so much what the curriculum is going to look like for our students, because I think there's a lot of research now. There's a lot of programs that can be used in order to build a real clear scaffold of what that program will consist of. But my fear is subject knowledge of members of staff, and no fault of their own, within the Key Stage 2 sector. Not only those who might, be supporting those children who still need phonics, but we've done training for several through schools. So from Key Stage 1 all the way through to secondary. But I think to start off with, those who are going to deliver a supportive program of phonics to students will need to make sure that they have secure subject knowledge for themselves. That's going to be fundamental. And I think, ensuring that those who are delivering that to start with have got that, and collectively, my journey of phonics hasn't been one solely on my own. It's about people coming together and sharing their experiences, sharing that knowledge, and what it actually looks like for them in terms of delivering it. But it's also, once securely that, and you've got that network of staff that feel confident, that disseminating that across the whole school in terms of, because let's face it, it's going to be sessions, whether it's done in English lessons or children have time away from the classroom for it to be delivered. But regardless of what subject they're going to be in, they still need to be supported. So it is important for everyone to have that, and to have members of staff knowing who is getting that support within their classes, whether it's design and technology or whether it's art and design, etc., because they will need that support within their subject.
Yeah, I agree with you there.
What's on your mind? Let us know your thoughts, ideas, and anecdotes. Drop us a line at beyondmailbag@twinkle.co.uk.
So I remember, I could read. I learned to read before I went to school, which I think genuinely helped me quite a lot. That I just learned to read organically from my parents and my elder siblings. But I do remember kind of struggling with specifically like technical words in science in particular, because it was quite often from Latin or Greek or other kind of less intuitive words, and I'd come across a word, just have no idea. And I remember feeling quite patronised, being told to look it up in a dictionary, which never helped because it would start with like a silent P. How do you make sure that those kids, those young people, they're not patronised and that we're not going back to I sat on a mat and stuff like that? So making sure that we're still accepting that they've got lots of intelligence and lots of skills while also supporting them with this area of weakness.
I mean, I can really resonate that, and I still say it now. I think as a person, I consider myself with a lot of common sense, but I don't particularly even now consider myself with a particularly high IQ. And I say that quite often, and I'm fine by it. I'm fine by it, but I always do add that. I do say, I've got a lot of common sense, but I don't think I've got a particularly high IQ. It's just something I feel. So I do really resonate with that. And I think, when these, I think we've got to be very cautious that, the updated reading framework came out in July. From a previous one that was produced a couple of years prior, with a heavier focus on, supporting children at Key Stage 2 who might still have gaps in their phonics knowledge. And I praise that, I praise that recommendation. I really, really do. But like you say, I think we've got to be really careful in terms of when people are putting programs together, that it reflects the audience that it needs to reflect. So, for example, I'll give you a little bit of context in terms of the Twinkle Phonics program. So we have something called Codebreakers, which is a Key Stage 2 intervention, and it's specifically aimed and written for Key Stage 2. So it follows the same pace and the same content as the Key Stage 1 version. The pace is actually a lot quicker because this is an intervention. We need to close the gap as quick as we can. So therefore, it is shortened. But it takes on the theme of spies. So so the main characters are spies, and the whole work around it is based around spies. And I think that's a really good hook for older pupils. And the resources that are produced are the same kind of supportive resources, but the imagery is a lot more mature. And the content that is coming through in terms of the supportive reading texts that are decodable to go alongside Codebreakers are also, in terms of the imagery and the content, reflective of the fact that it's supporting older pupils. And I think that's really important, that as programs are being developed, that is reflective. Because again, I can relate to that. No one wants to read Janet and John again for the umpteenth time. And especially when you've got no association, your life's moved on since Janet and John. And I think it's also about seeing yourself within the text that you're reading, that are decodable. And match your decoding level, because you are getting older, and there's so much influencing you as a character. And as a person, and you need to see that in the books that in the material that you're reading. And I think, again, going back to the kind of text that I read, or I couldn't read, the pictures went, which was really awful. And I had no hooks then to support me. So when I was reading things, and books are wonderful at developing imagery within your own mind. Well, I couldn't understand what I was reading, so I could develop that imagery. So I couldn't see myself or other people, let alone myself, in text, because I couldn't develop that imagery. So I think it's making sure, as you say, that they're not patronising, that they are reflective of a child's phonic decodable skills at that level, but they are relatable, really relatable.
This has been genuinely fascinating. Thank you so much for joining us, Ian. I think it's given me a better idea of how phonics work, which, it's something I'm interested in but quite ignorant of. So thank you.
Yeah, no, you're very welcome. I've really appreciated the opportunity to, not only reflect on my story, but I am a really big champion for phonics, and it is an exciting journey that we are going to make, but we need to make it together, definitely.
Yeah, thanks for sharing your story. That means a lot.
Thank you so much for joining us today. This has been genuinely fascinating. I'm going to go off and learn all about s and other phonics. Don't forget, if you want to hear more like this, to like and follow, and then of course subscribe on the platform of choice. And if you want to be part of the conversation, what do you do?
Email in to beyondmailbag@twinkle.co.uk. And remember,
And
that's twinkle with no E.
how does that work with phonics then?
Don't even go there.
The This podcast is proudly produced by Beyond. Please bear in mind the views and opinions expressed are those of individuals and may not represent those of Beyond or Twinkle.